Well, hello and welcome to this English lesson about sports. This is probably one of the big topics when you are learning English. There are so many people in the world that love watching sports and that love playing sports, and it is a relatively familiar topic for most people. I know we just recently watched the Olympics. I know there are several sporting matches every evening in every country in all different types of sports. So I thought it would be a good idea to do a lesson about sports. I'm sure you'll enjoy it, whether you are someone who watches a lot of sports, maybe you're someone who plays a lot of sports, or maybe you're just someone who's curious and wants to learn some words and phrases in English to be able to talk about sports. So the first picture is also from Eugene, and it's the phrase sports fan or the term sports fan. When you are someone who likes watching a certain sport, we say that you are a sports fan. And then we use the word fan in other ways as well. We'll say things like, are you a fan of football? Which basically means, do you watch football? Are you a fan of ice skating, which is an Olympic winter sport? And you might say, oh yeah, I'm a big fan. So a sports fan is someone who likes to watch a sport. You can see in Eugene's picture here, the stands are filled with sports fans. People have all worn red because the Toronto FC, their one uniform is red. So that is their team color. So they have worn red. All of the fans are there wearing red to support their team. And then we have something called a superfan. A superfan is someone who is really, really into a sport. In English, when you say someone is into something, it means they really, really like it. A super fan is more likely to dress up on game day. They're more likely to do crazy things. They might paint things on their faces. In university, sometimes super fans will, some guys will paint letters on their chest or other weird things when they go to a game. But a super fan is someone who really, really loves the sport that they watch. Of course, fans will cheer. One of the things that you do when you watch a game, whether you're at home or in the stadium, is that you will probably cheer when your team does well. You will say things like, yay. You will say things like, go, 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 when the player on your team is about to score. And then you might just yell, yeah, or something like that when they do score. But you will definitely cheer when your team scores. So I have to mention this. This is a lesson from about 2.5 years ago, but I have redone the lesson. I've added a whole bunch of new words. I removed a couple of words. So if some parts of this lesson seem familiar to a few of you, not all of you were here 2.5 years ago, that is why. So a person who plays a sport, though, is called a player. Someone who watches a sport is called a fan or a spectator. We'll talk about that later. Someone who plays a sport is called a player. We have what are called professional athletes. Professional athletes are people who are so good at playing the game that they get paid to play it. Their job is to play a sport. When I was younger, there was a brief moment where I thought, oh, it would be so cool to be a professional hockey player, to be a professional athlete who plays hockey. But I don't think I was good enough. I never really pursued that dream. But could you imagine what it would be like to be paid to play the sport that you love playing? That must be a really cool experience. It must be a lot of fun to be a professional athlete. We also have amateur athletes. I'm sure many of us have been or are amateur athletes. In Canada, it's quite common for people to play volleyball one night a week. People play hockey. We call it the rec league, recreational league. People play soccer or football, as you might call it in your country, in the summer. There are a lot of amateur athletes in Canada, and I'm sure in your country as well. People who play a sport just for exercise and for enjoyment, and they don't get paid. They don't get paid anything. When you play a team sport, you are on a team. There's a difference between individual sports like running and those kinds of things, and team sports like football or hockey or basketball or volleyball, where you have teammates. So a team is a group of people who all wear the same uniform usually, and they play the same sport together. And this can be amateur or professional. You can be on a team as a professional athlete, and as an amateur athlete, you can be on a team as well. And then again, I mentioned the word teammates. Teammates are the other people who are on your team. This is the Phoenix Mercury. It is one of the teams in the WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association. And the woman in the middle, the player in the middle, is Kia Nurse. She's one of my favorite players on that team. She's Canadian. I really, really like her. But a starting lineup, whenever a professional or amateur team plays against another team, the players who start the game are usually your best players. And that group of players is called the starting lineup. So when there is a basketball game, there are 5 players on the starting lineup. They start the game. When you go to watch a football game or soccer game, there are 11 players, I think, who are on the starting lineup. Those are the players who usually they're the best players. Most of them are usually the best players on the team, and they make up the starting lineup. Sometimes, depending on the sport, the team will have a captain. In hockey, the captain of the team is not the coach. The captain is a player who kind of leads the team in terms of keeping them happy and kind of demonstrating good behavior. In hockey, the captain usually has the letter C on their jersey. You can see on his hockey jersey, he has the letter C. This means that he is the captain of the team. So the captain, again, doesn't show the players how to play, but the captain kind of leads in a way where they kind of show they're like a model player. Usually they're a veteran player or a really good player, and they kind of lead the team in that sense. They give direction on how to be excited, how to act in a positive way, in those kinds of things. And we have, of course, a coach. A coach is a person who decides how to train the team. The coach decides who will play and who will sit on the bench. The coach decides what strategies a team is going to use in order to try and win. The coach basically prepares the team before the game and then makes decisions during the game so the team can do the best that they can. Again, a coach does not play. A coach usually wears a suit and tie. In a lot of sports, a coach will dress very, very nicely. And they will be on the sidelines or on the bench or off to the side of the field. And they will give advice to the players and make decisions about how to best try and win the game. We, of course, depending on the sport, you will have referees or umpires. There's a bunch of different names for the people who make sure all the players follow the rules of the game. Every sport that you play has rules, and it's important that everyone follows the rules, but humans are humans, and sometimes we break rules, either intentionally, like we decide to break the rule, or by accident. You just accidentally step off the field, or you accidentally trip someone, and then the referee or umpire will probably blow a whistle. I think I have a whistle up here. We'll look at that in a sec. And they will stop the game, and then they will either penalize one of the teams. There might be a foul or a card or something like that. But a referee or umpire usually makes sure the game goes smoothly. One thing to note, in North America, we usually call referees refs, and we call umpires umps. So we shorten the words. The words aren't that long, but so you might hear people in the stands say, come on, ref, that was a bad call. Or you might hear at a baseball game, you might say, come on, ump, that was a strike. So you might hear people use the short forms of those two words. Referee becomes ref, umpire becomes ump. So depending on the sport and what country you live in, there are definitely times when you play a game, but there's also times where you practice. In Canada, we usually refer to when a team gets together on a non-game day to work at becoming better at the sport. We call it a practice, or we call it training. So oftentimes a team will have a few games each week, but they will also have times where they go to practice or where they have training, where they just get together with the other players and coaches and they improve their skills. So they might practice dribbling if it's basketball. They might practice shooting if it's basketball, shooting the ball if it's football, or hockey. They might practice skating drills. They might do a whole bunch of things so that they become better at the sport. You practice a lot so that you can play a game or play a match. Depending on the sport you're playing, it will possibly have a different name. In Canada, sometimes people use match, sometimes people use game. Game, I think, is the general term for a time when one team plays against someone else or a person plays against someone else. If you do something wrong in a game, there will most likely be a whistle. Referees and umpires usually have a whistle in most sports. Some sports they don't. They just need to yell really loudly. But if you hear a whistle in a soccer game, play will stop, and then the referee will make a decision whether someone is getting a warning or a yellow card or a red card, or maybe it's just offsides or another rule has been broken, and they blow the whistle to kind of remind everyone of the rules and restart the game. So I mentioned these words a bit earlier. People who watch the game are called fans. When you're at the game, you're called spectators, or you're just called the crowd. So the crowd cheered or the spectators cheered. So if you are at a game and you are watching a game, you're part of the crowd that's watching the game, or you're one of the spectators. You're part of the spectators who are watching the game. Let me get a sip of water here. Oftentimes, spectators or the crowd at a game will wear the colors that their team normally wears. You'll see in this picture they're wearing, it looks like yellow and some purple for the team that they are cheering for. And you will sit in the stands, which I think is short for the word grandstand, but these are either called stands or bleachers. Okay, when you go to a game, if it's inside of a building or if it's outside, it will usually have stands or bleachers. I think bleachers are smaller than stands. Like at our school, we have bleachers in our gym. Basically, it's row seating. There's not chairs. There's like these benches row on row, and you sit in the stands or you sit in the bleachers when you cheer on whatever team you've gone to watch. The bleachers are sometimes really hard and your butt gets a little sore. So people often bring a small cushion if they're going to sit on the bleachers for a long time. So we have two terms. We have home. When you go to watch a game, if I go to Toronto to watch a game and I'm watching the Toronto Maple Leafs, they are the home team. The home team is the team that's playing in the stadium or on the field that is in their city. The opposite of home is either the away team, the guest team, or the visiting team. So we could say the away team, the visitors, the guests. We often in Canada use home and away. You can see on this scoreboard, there's a spot for the home team's score, and there's a spot for the away team's score. But you can also use guest or visitor. You'll see variations of this. But again, the home team is the team that's playing in their home city, in their home stadium. So let's talk about where people play. People play sports in stadiums. People play sports in arenas. So a stadium is a common place to go for American football, generally referred to as a stadium. And then an arena is generally used for hockey. So you go to a hockey arena to watch a hockey game. Look at how nice that ice looks. It's very, very smooth. Baseball games are usually played at a park or ballpark. So it's not really a park, but it's very green and it looks a little bit like a park, but its main purpose is for people to play baseball. So you will go to a ballpark. You might go and watch a game on a court. So you might watch tennis or basketball. There are a lot of sports that are played on a court, which is just a a surface that's prepared with the proper lines for that sport. You can see this is a basketball court, and it has the lines of the court, the center line, the 3-point line, the foul line. So you might watch a game that is played on a court, or it might be played on a field or pitch. By the way, this picture is also from Eugene. This is of BMO Field, where the Toronto FC play. So thanks again, Eugene. I think that's the third and last photo that I used from Eugene, but thank you. But you would call this a field. Notice I said it's BMO Field. In English, in Canada, we say BMO, but it's the Bank of Montreal, I think, BMO. So this is BMO Field where the Toronto FC play. In different parts of the world, you might call it a pitch as well. You play on the soccer pitch or the football pitch. I mentioned earlier that there's something called motorsports. Motorsports are sports where you drive either race cars or motorcycles or some sort of vehicle in order to try and get first place. Some people think that motorsports aren't real sports, but there is a word in English, motorsports, which makes me think that they are a sport. So you might watch Formula One, you might watch IndyCar. In North America, there's something called NASCAR. I'm sure in your part of the world, there are different kinds of motorsport with different kinds of vehicles. And they would, of course, have their competitions on a racetrack. A racetrack is like a road, but it's specially designed to go usually in a circle, and it's there so that people can go in a race and they can do their motorsport. When there is a game, there is almost always a score. I just put 3-1 here for fun, but there's usually a score. In English, common phrases would be, what's the score? Or did you see the game last night? Yeah, what was the final score? The score is the number of goals or points that a team has gotten versus the other team when they're playing. So when you watch a football game or soccer game, I'm using football as soccer right now, the score is usually something like 3-1 or 5-2 or 2-0 or 1-0. But when you watch something like basketball, the score is usually 102-90 or 97-78. Basketball, it's a fun sport. People score a lot. And then you have a scoreboard as well. So you can see on this scoreboard, it's 31-17. I would imagine they're playing American football. That's the kind of score you would see on a scoreboard when you watch American football. But you can see a scoreboard is a big lighted board that will show you what the score is when you watch a sporting event. Oftentimes, when you go to see a game, it's nice to sit in a place where you have a clear view of the scoreboard. Sometimes you go to a sporting event and the scoreboard is far away, or you're sitting somewhere where you can't see it. I like to be able to see the scoreboard so that I know what the score is. Now, I talked about the score. Depending on the sport that is being played, you will score a goal, you will score a point, you will get a point, you will get a goal. There's a number of ways to refer to it. But generally, in most sports, the reason you play is to get points or to score goals so that you can get more goals or points than the other team and you can win the game. So in this shot, you can see this girl is about to kick the soccer ball. She is going to try and get a goal so that her team can get another point. Notice I do kind of flip goal and point around a lot. That's fairly common when talking about sports. And of course, you want to win. You want to win the game. You want to get a win. Notice there's a verb and a noun version. So a team can have 7 wins. So that's the noun. They've won 7 times. When you play a game, you want to win the game. So to win is the verb form. So the goal of a team is to win. That's the goal. That's a lot of times people say it's not important to win. It's just important to have fun. But in professional sports, I think it's also important to win. And of course, the opposite is a loss. Okay, so if you have 7 wins, you might have 3 losses. That would be a pretty good record. And then I think I don't I don't have the verb form, but the verb form is to lose. Okay. So L-O-S-E. So the noun is a loss. The verb is to lose. And then sometimes you have a tie. I think this might be called a draw in some sports, but a tie is when each team has the same number of points, or each team has the same number of goals. Sometimes people are disappointed with a tie. I'm usually a little bit disappointed when a game is tied. Overtime. Sometimes when there is a tie, depending on the sport, there might be overtime. Overtime is extra time in the game where each team tries to win. So you can see here the score is 14-14. You can also see this scoreboard says home and guest. The last scoreboard said home and away. But this game is tie, and they might then have overtime. It really depends on the sport. Some sports you're allowed to end in a tie. Other sports sometimes have overtime or multiple overtimes until someone wins. And they might even have a shootout. That's where each team takes turns having one player shoot on the net or try to score in order to find out who the winner is. Players who don't play are usually on a bench. They literally sit on a bench in some sports, but these players have chairs. Even if it's all chairs, we still call it a bench. And people will even describe themselves as, oh, I play for this team, but I'm a bench player, or I'm on the starting lineup. So a bench player is someone who doesn't start the game. So a bench player is someone who starts the game sitting and probably gets subbed in later. Most teams will have a uniform. Here you can see this uniform is for a baseball team. They have a helmet. Probably they only wear the helmet when they're doing the batting. And then they have, obviously, all of the uniform is in the team colors. And then you need equipment. I didn't talk about cricket at all, but cricket is one game where you need certain kinds of equipment in order to play the game. You need certain gloves, you need a bat, you need padding as well. So some sports require equipment. Some sports require a lot of equipment. One of the reasons that hockey is an expensive sport to play is that you need a lot of equipment to play hockey, whereas soccer is a little bit cheaper to play because you don't need as much equipment. You need a good pair of shoes and maybe one other piece of protective gear. Sometimes when you play a sport professionally, you will have a sponsor. You can see this car is sponsored by Michelin. If you look at the very front of the car, you see the word Michelin there. So it looks like the Michelin tire company is one of the sponsors. A sponsor is someone who gives money so that a sport can exist. Okay, so many teams are sponsored by different brands in the world. Different companies will sponsor a team. And then often a professional team will play in a league like the National Football League or the European Football League, which are both different kinds of football. But a league is a group of teams where everyone is at the same level or very close in skill level, and they play against each other repeatedly until someone proves themselves to be the best team. If you are in a league, you will have a schedule. So maybe you have a 14-game season or a 90-game season. You have a schedule that shows every day when you are going to be playing that game. And you have a season. So different sports have different seasons. The NBA, the basketball league in North America, their season starts in about 5 or 6 days. I think the Raptors play their first basketball game on October 20th, and their season goes to mid to late spring. That's their season. The National Football League, the NFL, their season started in September, and it goes to about the second week of February when they have the Super Bowl, one of the biggest championship games in the world. So when you play a sport, especially a professional sport, you usually have a season. And then as you play through your season, there are standings. So this is a list of the teams in order of who's doing the best down to who's doing the worst. So the team at the top has the most wins. The team at the bottom has the fewest wins and probably the most losses. So that's what we would call the standings. So teams are always trying to move up in the standings. If they lose a game, they might move down in the standings. You always want to move up in the standings. Sometimes you have a regular season, but you might also have a tournament. So our teams at school, our school sports teams, they have a regular season. They play about 10 or 15 games, but every once in a while on a weekend, they'll go to a tournament. A tournament is outside of their season. The games don't count towards their standings, but it's just a day to go and play against a bunch of other teams, one after the other. Tournaments are pretty fun. COVID has made them pretty much impossible right now. I don't think we go to tournaments right now, but a tournament is a fun thing to do. It's usually over a weekend or a long weekend. And then, of course, at the end of a season, you have playoffs where different teams play each other. When you are in playoffs, if you lose, you are probably out. When you're out, it means that your season is over. So there's a regular season. At the end, there's a time when teams, the best teams, maybe the top 4 or the top 8 teams, start to play each other until they determine who is the best. And that usually happens in the finals or the championship game. So the very last game of the season determines the winner of the whole season. And it's usually called the finals or the championship. Now, it might be a series. Many times it's best 3 out of 5, best 5 out of 7. So in hockey, they usually play during the playoffs, they play 7 games, and you need to win 4 of the 7 games. So best 3 out of 5, best 4 out of 7. I think I said 5 out of 7. But usually it is a best of. So it is a series of games where you try to find who is the best. And then here, just a couple of things to wrap up the lesson. When the ref blows the whistle, you might get a penalty. In some sports, you might get a card. In other sports, if you do something really bad, you might be ejected from the game. When you're ejected, it means that you're asked to leave the building while the game is still being played. You have to do something pretty serious to be ejected from a game. And then finally, if you do something really bad, you might get a suspension. A suspension means that you probably get ejected and then you can't play the next game or maybe the game after as well. Often when players do something bad during the game, or even if they do something in life, like if they get arrested or they get caught doing something illegal, they will get a suspension and they will not be able to play.